We're back here on the Chase Thomas podcast where I am now looking at my old friend. It's the crab dribble himself. He's not a crab dribble. He's not a crab. No, he's Scott Rafferty of Sporting News. Scott, good afternoon, sir. How are you?
Good afternoon. I'm sorry to disappoint that I am indeed not a crab, but it's been a while. It's the first time we've done this on video, so it's all good, man. How are you doing?
Not too bad, not too bad. How long have you been growing the beard? Like, what are we looking at here?
It's been a long time.
Okay.
It's pretty long right now, I'm not going to lie. It's been probably a good decade since I last clean shaved.
Really?
Yeah, it's been a long time.
What would happen, like, if you just clean shave with the wife and you just walked around and you're like, what's up? Like, what do you mean? And would she, like, freak out? Like, how does that go?
Totally.
Like, okay.
I think I'd have a little bit of a baby face. Like, on one hand, that's probably not a bad thing. I think a lot of people may want to look younger, but I think I might look like 6 years younger if I didn't have a beard, and I'm not ready for that yet.
Okay.
So
what about mustache?
Just the mustache? I have thought about it because I basically had like the same kind of beard this whole time.
Mm-hmm.
So I've thought about mixing it up a little bit, but I'm not quite there. Anytime I think about doing it, I just can't get to that point.
Is it itchy? It looks
No.
itchy. No,
you got to use beard oil and all that good stuff.
and you're good to go. Oh, so you're the beard oil guy. You're you're not a novice. You know what you're doing. You've got it all ready to go every single day.
I'm in deep. I got my beard brush and everything. I'm in deep.
Man, I'll do the goatee one day. I give up. I'm a coward, Scott. Where like I'll grow this for a couple days and then I'm like, nope, it's too itchy. I'm out. Like this is driving me nuts. I can't get over the awkward portion in between like growing a beard and like this being patchy. I don't know if that will ever happen, but either way,
I don't
know. We'll see.
You got to commit. That's the thing
Yes.
that's difficult with it. You really got to commit. So that's the other thing that's scary to me is like if I clean shave, I know I'm going to go through that period again. So I'm just staying with it. I'm keeping it.
Absolutely. Scott, who have you been watching the most of the past week?
I've been watching a good amount of the Pelicans over the last week. I've watched a decent amount of the Hawks this season, actually.
That's unfortunate. You can turn us off if you want. Like you don't have to watch us. It's the worst.
I feel like we
watch.
talk about Trae Young every time I'm on this podcast, and it makes you very mad. But I also enjoy watching the Suns. So those are probably the three teams that I've been watching the most of so far.
Well, we can get the Hawks out of the way. They're not on my rundown. We can talk about it because I want to get your perspective on this. I mean, it's bad. The vibes are bad. How I like just tell other people about like Trae on the outside is Trae is a reply guy. Trae is not a poster. And I think that's something that a lot of Hawks fans they're getting closer and closer now with the latest spat with Nate McMillan. And Ryan Marcel made a good point about this. They went a little overboard on Bill Simmons' podcast yesterday about all the guards under 25 that would take over Trae. Like Desmond Bane was one of them. It's like, all right, let's calm down. Like there's a tipping point here where it's like, yeah, Booker for sure. And like there are guys, Ja, yeah. Even Ja, I might not because Ja keeps falling and keeps doing crazy stuff where I'm like, I don't know. I know Trae's going to play basketball at a pretty high level for the next 10 to 12 years. He's not going to get hurt. I don't know about Ja, so there is a part of that with me that scares me about Ja. But it's just he's not a leader. Like, it's just not in his nature, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like, Kevin Durant's not a leader. Like, Kevin Durant is just like, I just want to play basketball. I want to respond to people on Twitter. Like, I'm going to name search, that sort of thing. Like, it's just not in his nature. He still can be the second best player in the league or best player, depending on how he's playing. But it's not, you need people in the locker room to kind of keep those kind of guys accountable. You need other guys to step up and fill that void. And the Hawks don't really have that because DeJounte is not that dude either. DeJounte is so much fun to watch. DeJounte steals are something that I never knew I needed in my life. Like, he's so smart as a defender, and he's so fun to watch in transition. Like, it is still just rough for me. They're like the Hawks, when you watch them, it's no surprise they're one of the worst three-point shooting teams in basketball. You watch it and you're like, I don't know. The passing's terrible. Bogey opens up a lot. Like in the OKC game, that was just rough, where they just let OKC go on a big run late and just never came back. Bogey was shooting lights out, like on a minutes restriction, where he just had so many open threes, and it's because so much attention is drawn to DeJounte and Trae, but it's a lot of your turn, my turn. Like, they have not even come close. And I said before the year where I'm like, they still might work as a duo. The problem is Nate's not the guy to unlock Trae and DeJounte. Like, it's just, I don't see him being that kind of coach, the old school style coach of what we've seen in the past, where I think it's just going to be complicated to maximize this group, and I don't think he's the guy to maximize. You got to go outside the box to make this thing work, and I don't think he's along for this team, especially after a public spat with Trae Young, the franchise anchor. That I don't know. I just it's not working, and I think when people look at the standings, they're like, oh, they're fourth in the East. It's like, all right, there's a difference between the Cavs, Celtics, and Bucks, and then there's a significant drop off. Like the Hawks are not one of those teams. The Hawks are not running the gauntlet right now. It's not fun. The threes aren't there. The defense really isn't there. Certain guys just still are not available. You're not going to believe this, Scott, but DeAndre Hunter still never available. Like the man will never play 78, 80 games in a regular season, and they need him to so bad. AJ Griffin's awesome, which I didn't see coming.
He's
like
great.
AJ Griffin, he has removed the holidays from the rotation, which was something I've been saying since like game 2, where I'm like, oh god, like Justin, like losing Kevin Huerter for nothing, and then Justin Holiday coming in shooting like 27% for 3 for the majority of the first 20 plus games was like, I'm gonna lose my mind. Like, what is happening? Why do you trade for DeJounte when Kevin Huerter? Everything about the Hawks frustrates me, Scott. Talk me off the ledge.
I think this is hilarious, by the way. I think this is why I always bring up Trae Young on the Hawks, because just I let you go for like 5 minutes straight and just get everything off your chest.
Yeah, it's like therapy. It's a therapy session.
Yeah. I don't feel quite as doom and gloom about them. I do kind of like this team still. The Trae Young and DeJounte Murray was always going to take time to figure out, I think. Like, just on a very surface level, like, big picture, DeJounte Murray is a guy who needs the ball in his hands, so does Trae Young. Trae Young has shown flashes of being a really good off-ball scorer, but it's not something he does a ton. DeJounte Murray, the knock on him in his offensive game throughout his career has been his three-point shot. He's improved as a shooter big time. But even just that, figuring that out was always going to take some time. And they don't, as you said, have like knockdown three-point shooters around them. So spacing is going to be a little cramped. But look, Trae Young's still super young. Like, I think it's so easy to compare him to Luka because they were in the same draft and everything that happened. Luka is just in a different level in terms of like leadership and everything like that. I think Trae Young could get there eventually. Like, I don't think that's a huge knock on him right now to say that he's not that guy. But
do you think that's his personality? I just don't think it's his personality.
I don't know. But look, he's an awesome offensive player. Like, he's not even shooting that well to start this season. He still just drives a ton of offense. And to your point, the amount of attention that he draws and everything like that. I love Clint Capella. Always loved him. Think he's great for pairing with a guy like Trae Young and DeJounte Murray. I think the DeAndre Hunter, obviously him being able to kind of take that next step and be healthy is going to be huge for them. I'm fascinated to see what happens with John Collins, because I like John Collins. I think he's a valuable player. I think this year. Yeah, I know. But I think there's like other stuff in his game that a team can unlock. It just doesn't ever feel like it's really, really worked out for either side in Atlanta. So I'm wondering if, he's always involved in trade rumors. I wonder if this is the time that he does get traded. And also, like, they have to kind of nail it, right? Like, they need to get a good return for him, or at least someone who's going to kind of fit more of what they need, whether that is like, a Jay Crowder who is going to shoot a ton of threes. He's not necessarily a lights out shooter, but he's going to get him up and he's going to add spacing at that full. So I am fascinated to see how that kind of plays out.
They're just not a serious franchise. You don't trade Kevin Huerter in this kind of like Kevin doing just phenomenal work in Sacramento this year. You cannot in the same breath trade for DeJounte Murray, mortgage the future for DeJounte, and also just move on from Kevin Huerter because you don't want to pay a little bit more in the tax. Like, that's just not serious. Like, you're not serious about winning a title. That's not what you do. And if you want to be the Golden State Warriors East, you don't do something like that. And it's just bit them so hard to lose that trade. And like you said, Collins is it. Like, they don't have any other trade tips. Like, you can't move Hunter. He's too important. Like, AJ Griffin is one you finally hit on. Jalen Johnson has like Rui Hachimura itis, where he's on the court and he doesn't have any particular skill. He's just
scratching
running
off the bingo card here. Rui Hachimura, that's another one.
He's a Rui Hachimura, which is the worst NBA player that you can have, where like they are on the floor, you watch them, you're taking notes, and I'm like, this man could do nothing other than run in transition, where you're like, he could dunk it in transition. That is Jalen Johnson's one skill, is that he's solid and his dunks are cool in transition. He's not a good defender. He's not a good shooter. He's not a good passer. He doesn't do anything. Like, Jalen Johnson is out here getting cardio. At least Tony Snell, when he was out here getting cardio, he would be in the corner and shoot 40% from three. Like, that's, at least he's there doing that if you need him. Jalen Johnson doesn't do anything. Like, it just miss. Write him off. Miss. Out. Every Onyeka and Kongwu, just anything around the rim for him is like pulling teeth. Where you're just like Capella, you forget like how good his hands are and just his finishing ability and what he's able to do inside. Like Onyeka's still not there. Like he's terrified to shoot, and I thought the shot was coming because there was some offseason stuff about Onyeka where you're like he's shooting corner threes, he's gonna expand his game, and it's like nope, that man I think is more scared to shoot this year than he was last year. Which is not a good thing when this team has no shooting on it, really, in most lineups. But Bogey coming back is great. Guess who has injury problems and has just never been right? Is Bogey. You know who's always healthy? Kevin Huerter. What are we doing? This franchise is just gonna put me in an early grave, Scott. Like I hate it. Like this season could have been so much more fun, and Collins' trade value could not be lower. Like what are you getting for John Collins right now? He's shooting like 27% from three.
Yeah, it's not great timing. And with him being injured and everything.
No.
I will say about Clint Capella, by the way, I think he's a great example of like, you look at like James Wiseman, right? Everyone is just like, James Wiseman's huge. All he has to do is set screens, run. Like, it's easy.
Yeah.
But like, you look at Clint Capella and realize like how nailing all that stuff. First of all, having that buy-in of being like, I'm just going to be, protecting the rim. I'm going to set a ton of screens. I'm going to roll. I'm going to catch every lob. Like all these kind of things. Like how easy that sounds, but actually how hard it is to find someone who's going to do those things and do them really well. I've always loved Clint Capella. I always thought he's kind of like a great running man center to pair with another star. He was great next to Chris Paul and James Harden in Houston. He's been playing well next to Trae Young in Atlanta. So
yeah, and they're close. Yeah. So I don't know if they'll ever move, and that makes the Onyeka conversation more complicated because it's like if you're never going to have the space to just let him play 30-plus minutes a night to get comfortable with Trae and DeJounte, what are we doing here? Because he took him in the lottery. Like you need to eventually see what you have because you're going to have to pay Onyeka pretty soon. So I don't know. The Hawks are just. They need a lot of shooting. They need a lot of help, and I don't know. I'm not quite there yet. But DeJounte screens are fun, or steals are fun. So that's what I have right now. In terms of happy basketball related questions for you, Scott. The Lakers, have they turned the corner with AD?
Yes and no. I think they got off to obviously a miserable start this season. Like you looked at the numbers at the start of the season, they couldn't buy a bucket. They had like the worst offensive rating in the league by a mile. Couldn't buy a three. And then recently they've been significantly better. They're 8-3 over the last 11 games. I think after that Cavs loss last night. I mean they haven't beaten great teams during that stretch. They beat the Spurs 3 times, which is going to help kind of juice your record. Yeah. But look, you beat the teams that are ahead of you or in front of you. You got to give them credit for that. They also picked up a great win against the Bucks. But yeah, I mean, look, if AD is going to be playing at this level, like they're a different team, right? This is a team built around stars. It felt like after that first Lakers championship, like I myself included, but I think a lot of people thought that AD was going to take that MVP jump, right? Like he was going to establish himself as a top 5 player, be in the MVP conversation and Defensive Player of the Year conversation. That obviously didn't happen, mostly due to injuries, but I think we're just kind of seeing that player now. I mean, he's just completely changed his shot profile. Like you look at the numbers, he's never taken shots as close to the shot distance is the closest it's been of his NBA career. He's not settling for jumpers as much. Playing center obviously helps. Like that's what we've wanted to see from AD basically his entire career. Obviously the concern with him is health, just because this is a guy who's been banged up over the last few seasons. And I think now, the fact that he is playing exclusively center, like he's been pretty open in the past about how he doesn't like playing it because of kind of the wear and tear it takes to battle for rebounds, guard these other big guys. So that's the big thing for him. But I think, like LeBron's looking for him more. Russ, after a really shaky start to the season, has been so much better in that 6-man role. And he's really feeding AD. Like the pick and rolls between them have been doing well. So I think, to answer your question, I do think the Lakers have found something. I think there's more stability here. They figured out their rotation. If AD can kind of continue to play at this like MVP level, they look like a different team. I'm just not necessarily still buying them as like, one of the teams to beat in the West. Like I think it's still going to be really hard for them to kind of get out of that play-in territory.
I'm look at what is their schedule, because like you said, the people are just like the Lakers. I mean, people want to put the Lakers back in. You want to have AD and LeBron back in the playoff chase, but like, I mean, they're in Toronto tonight. No LeBron and AD. Yeah, you get the Celtics and Nuggets in a couple weeks. You go to Philly, Detroit. Yeah, you'll probably favor there, but then like you're at Phoenix on the 19th, at Sacramento on the 21st, at Dallas on Christmas. I mean, I see a lot of losses here. Like I just don't see they're not contenders. Like, I don't think there's enough here with this group, even with AD playing an MVP type level. And when people say that, I'm like, who's winning MVP in the play-in? Like, we don't see that ever. Like, you have to win significantly more games for AD to enter the MVP conversation. I don't know why that's coming up, where, like, he might be playing like one, but, like, the Lakers are still going to be in play-in. Who do you have falling down in the West right now? Like, the Pelicans are breaking through, and we'll talk about them. The Suns, like, barring devastating injuries, I don't see the path to the Lakers joining the top 4 with this group and just holding that on for 60-plus games. So if that's the case, like, AD has no shot of winning an MVP. None.
Things are just so jumbled right now in both the East and the West. You know what I mean? Like, you talked about it. At the East, you have the Celtics, you have the Bucks.
The East is done. We could just wrap it up. Like, it's just those 3. That's just it.
It is. But the West, I mean, I'm looking at it right now. There's the Suns at the top. Pelicans only half a game behind them. And there's only 3.5 games separating the Suns at the top from the Warriors in 10th. Like, you go on a couple game win streak, and who knows what you're going to look like next week. So I think that's just the MVP conversation as an aside is just so fascinating right now because there's so many guys you can make a case for. It's like one day Luka Doncic looks like the favorite, and then suddenly they lose, 3 out of 4, and they're below 500, and then it's like, but that's just kind of that conversation early in the season.
Luka's going to just start throwing basketballs at Mark Cuban on the side where it's like, Christian Wood? Is this what we're doing?
Hey, did you see what Jason Kidd said about Josh Green?
I did not.
The word superstar may have been involved.
Oh.
Talking about his potential and everything like that. Oof. So you can go to NBA Australia, or Gilbert McGregor wrote about that. It was quite the quote. But look, either way, the key thing for AD is can he sustain this for the rest of the season? That's a big thing. But I also think he has been playing. I mean, the health thing is just so big. Like, it's just such an unknown to me. You know what I mean?
He was walking around like Kevin McHale in game 1. Like, why are we just penciling it in? Like, he looked done. Like, the back looked cooked.
Yeah. But he's looked great lately. It's unfortunate that he left in that first quarter of that Cavs game with flu-like symptoms. So hopefully that's just, he misses a couple games. He's back to what he was before. But again, the health thing is just always going to be big for him. But his aggression and the way that he's kind of changed his shot profile is super encouraging to me. So, I mean,
how are they doing it though? Like, when you're watching what they're doing schematically, how has Darvin changed the shot profile for AD? Like, is AD starting that? Like, what is he doing differently to set those up? You said that, like, obviously with the PNR, with Russ has been good, but like, what has actually happened on the court schematically to put him in those positions? It's different than what they were doing before.
They've been running a ton of empty pick and rolls. So basically, like, Russell Westbrook or LeBron James get in the corner of the wing, run a pick and roll, and then it's just when AD's rolling, because this team is limited 3-point shooting, right? Like, they weren't great to start the season. They've been better lately, but they're still not getting a ton up. So I think, like, you need to work with any space that you can with AD. But he's just been relentless going to the basket. Like, floater range, he's been nailing it. And he's just been much more aggressive. He's getting to the line a ton as well, which I think, that speaks a ton to players like him and then kind of their mentality and everything. Because I think AD is one of those players who, like, when he's hitting jump shots, like, he's unstoppable, obviously. But, like, that's almost, like, secondary for him, right? You want him feasting at the basket first, and then when he's hitting jump shots, it's like it's game over. But I feel like over the last 2 years, he kind of settled for jumpers a little bit too much. And maybe I think some of that also speaks to kind of the roster construction and him playing next to another big man who's not able to space the floor. And when he's out there and he's the only big, I mean, the spacing is still a little cramped sometimes. I mean, Patrick Beverley has been a like decent to good 3-point shooter throughout his career. He's really struggled to start this season. Dennis Schroeder has been, like, shown flashes of being he's been pretty streaky as a 3-point shooter. The point being, like, Beverly, Schroeder, you got Ross out there sometimes, LeBron, like, they're still not great 3-point shooters, right? But I do think, him playing as physically as he is, and maximizing the spacing the most that he can, I think all that kind of has helped here.
The Pelicans may be the best story to me, where we were pretty in on the depth of this team, right? Like, they just don't have, like, the thing about the Pelicans I said before the year was that like, one of the things that will be super helpful for Willie Green, and I think it's an overlooked part of the NBA, and this is part of the reason I think the Sacramento Kings have been better, is they're just not going to play anyone bad. Like, the rotation has no weaknesses, where it's like, you may not love every player in this rotation, but they all are good NBA players. Like, the ones who are going to play minutes for this team are all good and have some sort of NBA skill. Like, whether it's Jose Alvarado, Herb Jones, you have Zion, you have Ingram, you go up and down the list, you're like, anyone who's playing right now for the Pelicans is a good NBA player. And I think that goes a long way in this league with these long seasons and injuries being a part of stuff. Like, to just have a rotation and have a collection of talent surrounding the superstar talent in Ingram and Zion is just, I think it was under talked about. And now they're breaking through. Like, they could be the number one seed in the West at the end. Like, it always happens, right? We're just always surprised when teams make the leap, but it's like the Grizzlies were ahead of schedule. Like, why could the Pelicans not just be number one in the West this year and next year? Like, that's how it happens. When you have a really good foundation, you have a bunch of depth, like, yeah, you can gobble up the wins. I guess for me, my one blind spot is I had the Wolves gobbling up a bunch of regular season wins, and that has obviously not happened, and the Pelicans have kind of filled that vacuum for me. But it should not be a surprise that the Suns, the Grizzlies, and the Pelicans, I think, are at the top of the West, because those three have young talent that are popping in a significant way with Booker, with Ingram, Zion, and Ja, and Desmond Bane too. But it's like they're just deep as hell. Like, those three teams are just, even with Jay Crowder not being there, even with Cam Johnson, like, the guys that they play are so well coached. All the top three, they're just so well coached, but also they're all solid. And I think that goes a long way. Is that a fair characterization of what's going on in the West?
I think so. I was right there with you, by the way, with the Timberwolves. I thought, at least in the regular season, I thought this was going to be a winning machine. But obviously it hasn't worked out like that. But yeah, I mean, the Pelicans are just so deep. To your point, like, I feel like when they got Devontae Graham a couple years ago, like, that was kind of a big deal for them, right? Like, he was coming off a breakout season, and it felt like he was going to kind of shore up their point guard depth. And it's like, he's what, like their 10th, 11th man now?
Yeah.
And it just kind of speaks to all these other guys that they've had during that time. Trey Murphy shooting the lights out, Herb Jones being the defender that he is, Jose Alvarado comes off the bench and scores 38 points the other night or whatever it was against the Nuggets. Like, they have guys who can just go off, but it's all built around this big three, really, of Zion, Brandon Ingram, and CJ McCollum, right? And you look at the numbers. I mean, they've had their injury struggles. I know CJ's was in health and safety protocols for a while. Zion has obviously missed some games. Ingram's missed some games now. But you look at the numbers with three on the court, like, they point to them being really, really good. And I think that's encouraging, super encouraging at the start of the season, because, like, to me, they look like a team that's still figuring it out, right? Like, CJ and Brandon Ingram obviously played next to each other last season. Zion didn't. Zion's a guy who needs the ball in his hands. So does Ingram. CJ can play off ball, but he's also the best with the ball in his hands. Like, is there enough touches to go around? And even now, right? Like, Zion kind of looks like the player he was 2 years ago. Before his latest injury, because he got off to a little bit of a slow start this season, which is to be expected. He missed all of last year, but he's back to 25 points, shooting Shaq like 65%, and obviously playing point Zion too. So I'm curious to see if they can kind of figure that out or optimize it the best way possible when Ingram comes back. That's the big question to me. But I still think, again, that number that they've been playing so well together to start the season is super encouraging. And as you said, like, their depth, this team just 1 through 10 feels like it can rotate guys in and out every single night and kind of sustain these injuries to even Ingram or Zion. So
yeah, it's like Najee Marshall, Larry Nance, Jose Alvarado, Tyson Daniels looks like he'll be a player.
Yep.
I mean, they just have depth everywhere, and I think it's a healthy ecosystem, and you can tell. Like, CJ McCollum has a 26% usage, which is only slightly below Zion, who leads the team at 27%. You got Ingram at 28%. Like, they're all even. It's not like where DeJounte comes in and Trae's usage somehow is higher than it was a year ago, which is like, that was not the point of this whole experiment. That was on it. It was to lower the usage from a lot of these guys and play more team basketball. It's not what's happening. They just, when you watch the Pelicans, you're like, the ecosystem is so healthy with this group. Like, what is your favorite 5-man lineup to watch for the Pelicans?
I mean, I'm curious. They have to have the three guys out there, right?
Yeah.
CJ, Brandon Ingram, Zion Williamson. I love Larry Nance. I've always been a huge fan of his. Injuries have been a problem for him throughout his career, but I just love his defensive versatility, the little stuff that he does offensively, the passing, his ability to play above the rim. And then really, so those four, and then switching out anyone that they need, like Herb Jones, Trey Murphy, if they need more three-point shooting. I just kind of like that four, and I think that's going to be kind of a staple for them in the playoffs. I love Jonas Valanciunas as well, right? Like, he's a guy who doesn't really get talked about as much. He does have his limitations offensively and defensively. I think he's, he brings a lot of value to this team, but I still like the idea of putting Larry Nance Jr. Next to Zion in that front court, kind of when they need it most or when push comes to shove.
I like it. How do the Warriors get right, Scott? How does it happen?
I'm not that worried about them.
Okay.
I'm really not. Like, they've gotten off to a bit of a slow start of the season. But I think, again, if you kind of take a step back, their starting five has still been absolutely incredible. I think they played the second most minutes of any starting five in the league to start this season. And that net rating is just off the charts. It's plus 23 net rating. I still just believe in that core. I think that five, championship tested. Andrew Wiggins has been better offensively than he was last season. Steph's playing, which seems crazy to say, some of the best basketball, if not the best basketball of his career, at least in the regular season. Klay Thompson's starting to figure it out a little bit. He's getting his legs underneath him, and Draymond's Draymond. The key for them is that second unit has just struggled so much. You looked at them last year, being able to put the guys on the court that they could. Gary Payton, all that kind of stuff. They just had a good, reliable second unit of guys who knew their role and were comfortable in their roles. And I think just the makeup of this team right now, there's so many young guys, Jonathan Kuminga, like all these guys want minutes. They're also still just trying to figure a lot of stuff out. And to be honest, like the Warriors, it's not the easiest. The Warriors offense is not like the easiest to figure out, right? There's a lot of cutting. There's a lot of movement. Everyone's got to be able to pass. Everyone's got to be able to shoot. A lot of quick decisions and everything like that. So I'm not surprised that the second unit has struggled as much as they have. I think Steve Kerr kind of moving Draymond Green to that second unit and leading them has helped a little bit. But I think, when everyone's healthy, I also think, their rotation is going to shorten in the playoffs, obviously. So I'm just not that worried about them right now. They've been pretty good at home. They've been really good at home. They've been awful on the road. I think that's going to change. But I'm just, with how jumbled everything is in the Western Conference right now, like, I think it would be different if it was like they're already 8 games behind the number one seed. You know what I mean? But the fact that they're still in this mix, despite this slow start to the season, like I'm just not that worried about them yet.
If you were to send, who I believe James Wiseman just got recalled today, he's always been rumored to the Hornets. Your bread and butter. Just Charlotte always looking for some sort of big rotation that they can count on. Who would you send in a Wiseman deal? Who would make sense?
It's an interesting question. I mean, Kelly Oubre, he's been there before in Golden State.
That went well. Let's do it. Let's do a read-up.
I know, it didn't go well. But at least a guy who can, shoot, get after it defensively, kind of fill that Otto Porter Jr. role a little bit of last season. I wouldn't be surprised if he makes sense. Look, Gordon Hayward, he's injured all the time. But, like, the playmaking, that if you put him... It's almost like Malcolm Brogdon, right? Like, Malcolm Brogdon's a great player. Maybe overextended a little bit as a starting point guard, at least from like being able to stay healthy perspective. You move him to the 6th man on a team, and it's just it's almost unfair. Not to say that necessarily happened with Gordon Hayward, but like if they did have a guy like that coming off their bench, playing 15-20 minutes a game, take some of the load off his shoulders, keep him healthy. I mean, I wouldn't hate that for them, but
I hadn't considered Hayward.
Yeah, they're the two guys who kind of, I guess, come to mind immediately for me.
I mean, this is going to be one of the most under-talked about what-ifs in basketball is if they had just taken LaMelo and not Wiseman. Like, what does this Warriors team look like? Do they still win the title with LaMelo and company? Like, I mean...
Well, Halliburton, right?
Or Halliburton. Yeah. Halliburton would have been... the thing about that one is just, like, now we're doing revisionist history where it's, like, Halliburton early. It's like, no one had Halliburton early. Like, no one... That would have been destroyed early on if you take Halliburton there. Like, that's... Halliburton, I don't know. I think people are over the top. Like, he's just a great late find, but like the idea that they messed up by not going Halliburton there, I don't know. LaMelo, it's just like, at the time I was like, I would just take LaMelo and see what happens. Like, who cares? Like, let's just bet on your ecosystem with Trae, it's just on the brain. Steph, Clay, and Draymond and see what happens. But I don't know. LaMelo, it's just kind of sad. Like, are the Hornets just, for me, they're the worst story in the NBA this year. Because I had Clifford where I'm like, at least Steve Clifford's going to be able to like drag some wins out of this bunch. There's no thing Steve Clifford likes doing than making the 8th seed in the Eastern Conference. That man's bread and butter is like, I am dragging DJ Augustine and company to an 8th seed, and we're going to make it horrible for whoever we play in the first round. That is our MO. They're just awful all across the board. Part of it's not their fault. Like the Miles Bridges stuff was horrific, and nothing you can do there as a team. Like at that point, you're just like, all right, well, that's just an asset, major asset gone for nothing. Gordon Hayward never healthy, LaMelo not healthy. You go up and down the list, and you're like, oh my god, like you whiffed on the Book Knight, or how do you even pronounce his name? Is it Book Knight? Book Knight,
I think.
Yeah, that has not gone well whatsoever. You don't get the hire you wanted, and Kenny Atkinson, he backs out. So then you flip, and why you didn't just hire Mike D'Antoni will just be a mystery to me forever. I don't know. I don't think because it's Charlotte and they're under talked about, but like I think the mess in the last calendar year for the Hornets has been one of the bigger under talked about disasters in the NBA. And I don't know how you get out of it. I think this is just rough all across the board.
You know how you get out of it?
How do you do it?
You get the number 1 pick in the NBA draft.
Well, the Spurs are like, hold my beer. Like Spurs are like, I don't care what we have to do, but we're getting Victor Wembanyama. Like that's that's Popovich's last gift for the Spurs. Is like, I'm gonna do this, tank for you guys, swallow my pride, and do whatever it takes. I'll get you Victor, and you have your next Tim Duncan forever.
I mean, look, the Hornets are already in that range, and they could trade Terry Rozier, they could trade Gordon Hayward, they could trade Kelly Oubre, and suddenly LaMelo Ball's still out with an ankle injury, and they just can't pick up a win or compete on a night-to-night basis. So I wouldn't put it beyond them. I think they could enter kind of those sweepstakes pretty easily. But yeah, it's not rough. I mean, you said it. The Bridges stuff was obviously awful, but it was a huge loss for them. Like the guy was a borderline all-star last year. You know what I mean? Now he's just no longer with the team at all.
And you didn't get anything for him. It's not like you lost and you traded him. No, it's just like nothing.
Yeah. So you combine that with Gordon Hayward not being able to stay healthy, LaMelo Ball being out, and suddenly, I mean, wins are nearly impossible to come by, it feels like. So, look, they still have LaMelo. I think that's the one positive they have here. You know what I mean? They're probably going to get a high pick in the 2023 NBA draft, and I'm not a big draft guy, but everyone who is into that thing is saying how good this draft class can be, especially at the top. Everyone knows Victor Wembanyama, but Scoot Henderson.
They feel like a Scoot Henderson team. I don't know why. They just feel like a Scoot Henderson team to me.
I mean, I have zero faith that even if the Hornets finish with the worst record in the league, that they'd get the number 1 pick in the draft. Like you go back to the AD MKG draft, that kind of stuff. I just, there's part of me that just thinks no matter what, even if they have the best odds, it wouldn't go in their favor. But yeah, Scoot Henderson, I don't know what that looks like with like Scoot Henderson, LaMelo Ball backcourt, but I think even if you're in that situation, you probably just take the best player and figure it out down the road, because even if you can kind of build a competitive team for a few years, that's better than what they have right now, and you can kind of figure it out eventually. But all this to say, it is not great for the Hornets right now. So I think even going into this season, they seemed like a team that was going to be competing for, one of the worst records in the league and kind of being in those Victor Wembanyama mistakes. But I don't see that changing anytime soon, obviously.
Why do the Heat stink, Scott? Why are they bad?
It's a great question. They've been a very weird and one of the most unpredictable teams, I feel like, to start this season. And look, I think some of it is Jimmy Butler has been in and out of the lineup. He is easily their best player. He's a top 10, 15 player in the league when healthy. We've seen what he's been able to do in the playoffs in the past. Having him out there obviously helps a ton. But look, I mean, like, Kyle Lowry's shown some flashes. I think it's still safe to say that he's not the player that they necessarily hoped they'd have when they traded for him. Hopefully he can kind of get back to that. But I think one of the positives is Bam Adebayo has been awesome. Like he does feel like he's kind of taken another step, especially offensively. Like I still don't know if he's ever going to be kind of like a number 1 or number 2 option on a really good team offensively. But you pair what he's doing now with that defense, like defensive player of the year caliber stuff. He's just, I've always been a big fan of Bam, so I think he's a really special player. But I also think like losing PJ Tucker hurt them, right? I know it's easy to kind of hate on PJ Tucker, especially when it feels like he's not taking any shots over like a 10-game stretch and can't score in double figures. But there's something to be said about a guy who, one, gets after it defensively, and two, also just knows their role and is really comfortable in it. And also in today's NBA, having a guy like a physical 4, it's just so important. And I think that's why, there are teams rumored to be interested in like Jay Crowder because he fills that kind of similar role. So I think
he was awesome for them in the bubble.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's just a combination of things, to be honest. I still, not like Warriors level, like I'm not concerned about them because there is definitely some warning signs there. But I still think I'm going to bank on Eric Spoelstra being able to figure some stuff out and still do enough to where this team's going to make the playoffs. And then if they're healthy, like I still don't think any team's going to want to face Jimmy Butler mainly, but even like a Bam Adebayo, Kyle Lowry, who manages to get under everyone's skin. But again, it's been a weird season so far. Like there's so many teams bunched up in both conferences. You know what I mean? Like the East is just so weird. You have a team like the Raptors who you catch them on the right week and it's just like, oh, this team has something that's special. And suddenly they get blown out in back-to-back games. Fred VanVleet can't buy a shot. Scotty Barnes is struggling a little bit.
It's because the main guys are playing 50 minutes a night. It's just one week that's like, how much time off do they get? Because you look at their box score. I love looking at the Raptors, where it's like watching a college game with them, where I'm amazed that they're able to do what they're able to do because they're like, nope, we're playing 8. And honestly, if I'm Nick Nurse, it's like he's like, I want to play 7. Can I go 6? Can I go 6 every night? Let's do that.
He's got a playoff rotation in the regular season.
Yeah, like that. He's the only one who does this year over year. We thought it was going to be like a blip where it's like, hey, they're kind of thin and he wants to maximize his group. It's like, no, I think this dude just really wants to play 6 or 7 guys. I think that's his jam.
I mean, the injuries, they've really struggled with injuries. Pascal Siakam missed time. Fred VanVleet missed a bit of time. Otto Porter Jr.'s only played like a couple games. Chris Boucher's missed some games. Like that hurts. Precious Achiuwa's out as well. Like I think if everyone's healthy, the bench has been a big problem for the Raptors over the last few seasons. I feel like when everyone's healthy, like there's a roadmap to them actually having like a good bench or a decent bench. And when you pair that with what the guys in the starting 5 can do, like we have a weekly podcast on NBA Sound System, and everyone at Sporting News knows how much I love OG Anunoby and give me a lot of crap for it. But OG's been awesome this season. Like defensively, he's playing like all defense caliber level. Offensively, he's averaging nearly 20 points per game. Like him taking that leap, Pascal Siakam, the amount he's improved in his career is outrageous. I know he had that kind of hit a wall in the bubble, struggled a little bit the season after, but the amount he just like levels up every single season. So I think, you have those two guys. Scotty Barnes, I have confidence that he's going to figure it out. It's been a little up and down this season. And again, Fred VanVleet's a guy I'm going to bank on being able to kind of at least be a better three-point shooter. I love what he brings defensively. So they're just another one of those teams. Like I just think teams are still figuring stuff out. You know what I mean? So if the Heat, if the Raptors and all these kind of teams are looking the same after, 20, 30 more games, I think it's time to be concerned. But with just how jumbled everything is right now, like I guess I don't know how much to overreact to things so far.
Schematically, we'll end on this, Scott. Who have you enjoyed most from a scheme front? Who have you enjoyed watching the most this year?
I really enjoy watching the Cavs. I love that Lakers game was a lot of fun, but like I just love their 4. I love Jared Allen. I love Evan Mobley. I love Donovan Mitchell. I love Darius Garland. I think they complement each other pretty well. They've hit that. There's been some there were some questions going into the season on how well they could figure it out, how long it would take. They look pretty comfortable altogether. I know there's some nights where it still feels like Evan Mobley could be more involved offensively to me, but I was high going onto this call going into the season, and I just love watching them. The Celtics have been so much fun offensively. They just play 5 out. I can't remember. They definitely have had the best offensive rating. They still do by a mile. They're up 2.7 points per 100 possessions over the Suns, making a ton of threes. The way they move the ball, Al Horford stretching the floor out to the 5 as a 5. Jason Tatum making that leap. Jaylen Brown, it doesn't feel like he's getting enough attention for the season he's having. He's just been absolutely awesome, and I love the guys. Derek White filling his role. I love Grant Williams, what he does defensively, but also what he brings offensively. So I've just really enjoyed watching them. How much they've improved offensively. I am very curious to see kind of how Robert Williams III, when he comes back, impacts everything. Because obviously, they haven't been as good defensively. Like, they were the best defensive team in the NBA last season by a decent margin as well. But, like, they've slipped a little bit on that end of the court. So I think, obviously, having one of the best defenders, arguably the best rim protector in the league, they should improve quite a lot defensively. I wonder if him being on the court impacts their spacing enough where they're not by far and away the best offensive team in the league. But I also think you take that if you're going to be a top 10, top 5 defense again. So I'm curious to see how that works out. The Jazz have also been fun. Like, I don't know how much longer they can sustain this. But the way that Jordan Clarkson's been playing, Larry Markkinen, it's going to be hard for him to make the All-Star team in the West. Like, both conferences, the All-Star teams are just going to be absolutely loaded this season. There's going to be so many snubs. But he's been great, and I just love what Will Hardy's done with his team, what they've been able to do offensively. So those are kind of the 3 teams that jumped out to me that we haven't discussed as much today.
I like it. Scott, what can the good folks check out from you and the team over at Sporting News NBA this week?
We got lots of stuff going on. We always hammer the Raptors hard. We got Lakers stuff. Steph No, our NBA writer, had a good story on AD the other day, so you should go read that. Lots of good Warriors games coming up. I just wrote about Luka Doncic and how his post-up game, how much he's improved. Not that we need to talk more about Trae Young and Luka Doncic because I know those are your favorite topics. But,
love it. It's my favorite.
But Luka is posting up a ton this season, and I love any guy who can do the things that he can do in the post. Jokic the same way. So those are a few things that we have kind of going on.
Luka was like, I understand the whole speed and tempo and all that kind of stuff, but I'd rather, I'm not going to do any of that. I'm Luka Doncic, and I want to keep the pounds. I want to I just kind of want to do what Jokic is doing. He seems like he's having more fun. He won back-to-back MVPs. I'm just going to take it easy. We're not running. Like, the running days, those are gone. We're not doing that. We're jogging up the floor. We're going to make this look like a pickup game. And I think it's more disrespectful that Luke is dominating this way because you know it's coming. He's so slow and just post up. And it's like, what do? Like, you have the bench. Where was that the GIF that I saw a couple days ago where it's like Luka is posting, was it the Suns? Who was it? Where he's posting up somebody and he clearly doubles, but like the ref misses it and the whole bench is like losing their minds at him doubling. And I'm like, all right, if that's where you're at as NBA players, like you're just really dying on a hill of like they need to call the double on Luka. It's like, all right, man. I'm like, he's got you beat. Like, who cares? Like, do something else. Like, if you're at the point, that's just loser territory to be like, oh, that's a double dribble. How do you miss that? That's like what you see at high school games and stuff like that. It's like
everyone does it. There's so many carries, so many travels. They're calling
John Morant's the king though. John Morant is the king of this.
Yeah. But Luka's awesome. I will just, it'll never get old to me watching him. You know, he absolutely dominates the ball, but like what he's able, the pass he had last night against the Nuggets where he just looked off someone, hit it to Christian Wood wide open underneath the basket. Like the stuff that he does on a night-to-night basis, no one's doing right now. He's just so much fun to watch. And yeah, it's crazy to think, you know, I feel like I remember when he came into the NBA draft, there was some concerns like,
all right, this is enough. No like more. Scott. This is gonna ruin my.
Afternoon. Yeah. There were some questions about like how high of a ceiling did he have? Like, is he relatively close to that compared to everyone else? Mm-hmm. And it's like he's already All NBA first team, and he just continues to add to his game. So I will never say enough good things about Luka. But yeah, I'll end it there.
God,
sorry. We started out with Trae, we ended with Luka. I'm back.
Man.
You know I'm back when this happens.
I know. Hey, it is what it is. Let's say, look, Luka's awesome, and it is what it is. Scott Rafferty, thank you so much for making the time this afternoon. It was great to see you and to reconnect here on this very program. And don't be a stranger. Let's get back in our groove.
Yeah, it was too long, man. I appreciate it.